The hangar was silent, except for the faint drip of rain leaking from the vast metal roof, each sound echoing in the hollow space. A Billionaire's jet stood in the center like a wounded giant, its sleek body reflecting fractured light, its pride stripped away by failure. Men in fine suits walked back and forth, murmuring into phones, their voices sharp with frustration. Engineers with tired faces had already retreated, defeated by the stubborn heart of the machine. Near the edge of the hangar, a girl watched. She was barefoot, her clothes damp and frayed, the collar stretched from years of wear. Stray strands of curly hair clung to her cheeks, damp with the mist that drifted through the open doors. She had no place among these men of wealth and precision, yet she couldn't look away. The girl, no one there knew her name, had been sleeping near the hangar for days, stealing scraps of food when no one was watching. The jet had fascinated her, not just its gleaming body, but the whispers of its power, the way its silence seemed to ache. She could almost feel its voice trapped inside, waiting to be freed. One of the men shouted, his voice heavy with arrogance. "Enough. If the engineers cannot fix it, then no one can. Cancel the flight." The words cut through the girl's chest, stirring something deep. She pressed her palms against her tattered dress, steadying herself. Her heart thundered, not from fear, but from a sudden clarity. She stepped forward, her bare feet echoing faintly on the cold floor. The men turned, their eyes narrowing, disgust curling in their expressions. But she didn't stop. Her voice trembled, yet carried a strange firmness. "If you permit," she paused, drawing breath as though summoning courage from every scar she carried. "If you permit, I will fix it." For a moment, silence pressed against the walls. Rain tapped the roof. The men stared at her, as though she had spoken madness. Yet in her dark eyes there was no madness, only a quiet certainty that unsettled them. And at the far end of the hangar, seated on a leather chair with the air of one accustomed to ruling rooms, the billionaire slowly raised his head. His gaze fixed on her, curious, sharp, and faintly amused. The billionaire's name was not spoken often in whispers, but in bold, commanding tones that carried respect, fear, and awe. He was a man whose decisions rippled across cities, shaping skylines and futures alike. His tailored suit clung to him as though stitched from power itself, his wrist heavy with a watch that could feed families for years. Yet now his face, still unreadable, regarded the barefoot girl who dared intrude upon his world. The men around him erupted in disbelief. "Ridiculous," one barked, gesturing toward her with a sneer. "She's a beggar. She wouldn't know a bolt from a wire." Another laughed, shaking his head. "We brought in the finest mechanics from across the continent. She thinks she can succeed where they failed?" Their words cut the air like knives, but the girl's eyes never wavered. Her thin frame seemed fragile, but there was something in her stance, an unshaken resolve, that no insult could break. The billionaire raised a hand, silencing the room. The hangar fell into a thick hush, only the hum of distant generators filling the space. His gaze locked onto her face, searching, as if peeling back the layers of dirt and hunger to see what lay beneath. "What makes you believe you can?" His voice was low, even, yet it carried the weight of command. The girl swallowed, her throat dry. She remembered nights curled on cardboard under broken street lamps, staring at old magazines of machines she had scavenged from trash piles. She remembered the first time she touched a discarded engine part, feeling its grooves as if they were the lines of her own hand. And she remembered her father's voice, before the fire, before the loss, teaching her to listen, not just to look. "I know how to listen," she said softly, almost reverently. Her voice trembled, but each word rang clear. "Engines, they speak, and this one, it's crying." Laughter broke out among the men, harsh and scornful. One shook his head, muttering, "She's mad." Another turned away, dismissing her entirely. But the billionaire did not laugh. He leaned back slowly, folding his arms, eyes narrowing. There was something about the way she stood there, unflinching beneath their contempt, her face lit by the pale glow of the hangar lights. He saw no fear, only truth, naked and unpolished. The rain outside deepened, thunder rolling distantly, as though the world itself leaned in to hear. "Very well," he said at last, his voice steady as stone. "Show me." Gasps spread through the room. The men shifted uneasily, their certainty shaken. But the girl, her heart hammering like a drum, took a single step forward, her bare feet leaving faint, damp prints on the polished floor. She had been waiting for this moment her entire life, though she had never dared to name it. And now the machine, broken and silenced, seemed to wait with her. The hangar's vast doors groaned under the storm winds outside, but inside, all eyes followed the thin girl as she approached the silent jet. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from awe. She had seen engines before, scraps in junkyards, rusted machines on abandoned construction sites, but this was alive, a beast of steel and fire, wounded but not yet dead. She placed her palm gently against the metal casing, closing her eyes. The room bristled with murmurs. Engineers exchanged looks of disbelief. One scoffed, "Does she think it's a child she can soothe with lullabies?" But the girl, Olivia, did not hear them. In her mind, another sound rose. The crackle of flames, the collapsing roof, her father's rough hands pushing her through smoke, shouting above the roar. "Never stop listening, Olivia. Even machines cry for help." Her throat tightened. That was the night she lost everything, her family, her home, her safety. Since then, the streets had been her only teacher. She had learned to survive by fixing radios no one else cared for, stitching bicycles together from scraps, repairing toys for children who had more smiles than she ever did. And now, here she was, standing before a billionaire's broken treasure. She opened her eyes, her gaze sharpened. "The problem isn't the fuel," she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the room. The billionaire, who had been silently watching, tilted his head. She crouched near the engine, her hands gliding over bolts and panels with familiarity that startled even herself. "And it isn't the wiring. They replaced it, but they didn't listen. There's a fracture here." She tapped a spot near the intake valve with her knuckle, the hollow sound echoing strangely in the vast hangar. One of the engineers snorted. "Impossible! We checked that valve a dozen times." Olivia's lips curved into the faintest shadow of a smile. "You checked with your eyes, but you didn't hear it." She leaned closer, pressing her ear against the machine. The silence stretched. Rain hammered on the roof, thunder grumbled, but everyone in the room held their breath. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "It's breathing unevenly, like a man with broken ribs." The billionaire's eyes glinted, interest sparking where pride once held its fortress. He leaned forward, his jaw resting on one hand. For the first time in hours, perhaps days, he looked less like a man of marble and more like a man curious. "Bring her tools," he ordered suddenly. His voice echoed like a verdict. The room erupted. Protests filled the air. "She'll ruin it! This is madness! What if she breaks it beyond repair? But the billionaire raised his hand, and silence slammed down again. His gaze stayed on her, steady, calculating. You said you can fix it. Prove it. Olivia's chest rose and fell, her heartbeat pounding against her ribs. The weight of the world pressed down, but so did something else. A chance, the kind she had never been given before. Her fingers flexed as a small toolbox was shoved into her hands. She knelt by the wounded machine, the storm outside raging as though it too awaited what she would do. And in that moment, soaked in sweat and shadows, Olivia whispered to herself the same words her father once told her. Listen, and it will tell you how to heal it. The hangar had grown heavy with silence. Every eye lingered on the girl crouched beside the massive jet engine, her slender frame dwarfed by steel and rivets. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, and outside the storm lashed against the metal roof like an impatient drum. Olivia inhaled, steadying her trembling hands. The toolbox beside her felt foreign. She had spent years scavenging with nothing more than rusted pliers and bent nails. Yet here were polished wrenches and precise instruments that gleamed like treasure. She touched them carefully, reverently, before selecting a slender wrench. Her fingers wrapped around the handle, and she whispered beneath her breath, "Easy, just listen." The engineers gathered in a cluster, muttering among themselves. One folded his arms, his jaw set tight with disdain. Another shook his head. "She'll strip the bolts. This is theater, nothing more." But their voices blurred into background noise. Olivia was elsewhere now, inside the pulse of the machine. She loosened a small panel, sliding it aside. A faint hiss of air escaped, and she tilted her head, her ear close to the cavity. Her brow furrowed. "There," she murmured, "it's leaking pressure, just like lungs do when they're punctured." One of the engineers scoffed loudly. "Engines don't breathe, girl. Stop playing doctor." But then the billionaire's voice cut sharply through the air. Quiet. His tone left no room for argument. The man who had always been obeyed now commanded silence not out of arrogance, but because something within him had shifted, something that recognized truth in her strange words. Olivia's mind drifted again, unbidden, to the night of the fire. She remembered crouching in the rubble, her little hands pressed to the earth, listening to the faint creak of collapsing beams. Her father's voice had rung clear through the chaos. Even the broken speak, if you know how to hear them. She swallowed hard, focusing back on the task. With careful precision, she removed a twisted valve, holding it up to the harsh light. Tiny fractures webbed across its surface, invisible unless one knew to look. She traced them with a fingertip, the way one might trace scars on a wounded body. "This," she said softly, "is the heart of your problem." The billionaire leaned forward in his chair, his sharp eyes locked on the tiny piece of metal in her hand. The engineers leaned closer too, their skepticism cracking into curiosity. "Impossible," one whispered. "We replaced that part twice." Olivia shook her head. "You replaced it with the same design. It will always fail. But if you shift the alignment, just slightly, it can breathe again." Her words hung in the air like fragile glass. And then, slowly, she began to work. Every movement was deliberate, patient. She dismantled the section, laying pieces out like puzzle fragments, her fingers smudged with oil and grime. At times she paused, tilting her head as though listening to a voice no one else could hear. At times her hands hesitated, trembling with the weight of fear. What if she failed? What if this chance slipped through her fingers as every other had? But then she breathed deeply, grounding herself in the rhythm of the storm outside, the faint hum of electricity in the lights above, and the memory of her father's trust. The billionaire rose from his seat and approached, slow but steady. He stood a few feet away, close enough to watch the tiny furrow in her brow, the stubborn determination written across his face. His voice, when it came, was low, almost reverent. "What are you hearing, girl?" Olivia didn't look up. Her wrench turned a bolt with a sharp click. "I'm hearing where it hurts." For a moment neither spoke, only the sound of her tools filled the cavernous space. Then she glanced up, her eyes meeting his, dark and tired, eyes framed by wealth, power, and loneliness. "Machines break for the same reason people do," she said softly, "because no one listens until it's too late." The billionaire's chest tightened, though he did not show it. He simply watched, silently, as the girl who had nothing bent over the machine that meant everything to him, repairing it not with blueprints or theory, but with instinct, memory, and a strange kind of love. And for the first time, in that echoing hangar full of doubt and storm, hope flickered. The hangar had grown so still that even the storm outside seemed to quiet. Olivia's hands were blackened now, streaked with oil that smudged against her cheeks when she brushed away loose curls of hair. She had laid out the broken valve and the replacement part side by side, her eyes narrowing as she studied the delicate fractures. The billionaire stood close enough to hear her mutter under her breath, "Not this way, not again." She picked up a file, her touch precise, and began reshaping the replacement piece, minute strokes, shaving away the sharp edge until it curved in a subtle arc. Every scrape of the tool echoed, brittle and sharp, until at last she stopped, exhaled, and held the piece against the light. It gleamed now, softened in the places that once cracked under pressure. When she fitted it back into the engine, her breath caught in her chest. The engineers shifted uneasily. One whispered, "If this fails, she'll destroy the entire turbine." But Olivia heard none of it. Her heart was a drum, pounding loud enough to drown their doubt. With slow, trembling fingers, she secured the last bolt, wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, and whispered, "It's ready." The words rippled through the hangar like a bell. The billionaire's voice was calm, steady. "Then we test it." The engineers hurried forward, some protesting, others scrambling to follow orders. Heavy cables were connected, panels closed, instruments checked. Olivia stepped back, her knees weak, as the massive machine loomed before her, no longer a dead weight of steel, but something poised to breathe. One of the engineers glanced at her with barely concealed scorn. "If this explodes, it's on you." Olivia said nothing. She pressed her palms together, as if in silent prayer. The billionaire gave the signal. A deep hum rolled through the hangar as the turbines began to stir. The lights overhead flickered. A gust of hot air blasted from the exhaust. The sound rose, low and guttural, then higher, rising like a beast awakening from sleep. Olivia's heart climbed with it, every note of the engine vibrating against her ribs. She closed her eyes, listening, not with fear, but with the raw hope of a soul who had given everything she had to this moment. The roar leveled into a smooth, steady rhythm, not choking, not faltering, breathing. The engineers froze, wide-eyed. Instruments flashed green, pressure gauges steadied. Every number, every reading confirmed the impossible. The jet engine was alive again. For a moment, no one spoke. The thunder of the engine filled the hangar, glorious and deafening. Then, slowly, Olivia opened her eyes. The billionaire was staring at her, not with suspicion, not with disdain, but with something deeper, respect, and perhaps, beneath it all, a flicker of awe.
She swayed slightly, her body exhausted from the hours of focus and tension, but her lips curved into the smallest smile as she whispered, almost to herself, "It breathes again." And though the storm outside raged on, inside that hangar, all anyone could hear was triumph.
The engine wound down, its mighty roar easing into silence, leaving behind an echo that clung to the hangar walls. A silence followed, thick, reverent, disbelieving. The engineers still stood frozen, their expressions caught between shame and bewilderment. The billionaire, however, did not look at the machine. His gaze was fixed entirely on Olivia. She stood a few paces away, swaying slightly on her feet. Her face was streaked with oil and sweat, her clothes torn and damp from the storm she had crossed to reach this place. Yet there was a quiet light in her eyes, a soft, fragile glow that seemed to rise from the ashes of her exhaustion. He stepped closer. "Who are you?" His voice was low, careful, as though asking something sacred. Olivia blinked, startled. She opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, "No one, just someone who listens." "Listens?" His brow furrowed. Her eyes flicked toward the engine. "Engines speak. Machines, they tell you what they need. If you stop trying to force them into silence, if you just listen, you hear where the pain is, where the crack begins." The billionaire studied her, every word she spoke sinking deeper into his chest than he expected. Behind him, one of the engineers scoffed. "That's nonsense. Machines don't talk. She just got lucky." But the billionaire silenced him with a sharp look. When he turned back, Olivia was already retreating, her body trembling from exhaustion. "Wait." His voice carried a weight that made her pause. She turned slightly, wary. "You've done what none of them could. You've saved something worth more than any contract I've signed in my life. Tell me," his tone softened, "why would someone with such talent live out there, on the streets?" The question cut deeper than he knew. Olivia lowered her gaze, her fingers twisting together. "Because life doesn't ask what you can do. It just takes. One mistake, one loss, and suddenly you don't belong anywhere." Her voice cracked, soft as paper tearing. She forced a small smile that carried more sorrow than joy. "So I learned to belong nowhere." For the first time that night, the billionaire felt something shift inside him. All the wealth in his world, all the steel and glass he owned, had never shown him a truth as raw as this. The storm outside rumbled again, lightning flashing through the hangar's high windows. The engineers began muttering among themselves, some angry at being outdone, others humbled into silence. But none of that mattered, not to him. He took another step forward. His tone was steady, though his eyes betrayed the stirrings of an unfamiliar emotion. "You don't belong nowhere, Olivia. Not anymore." Her breath caught at the sound of her name, spoken with such certainty, as if he had known it all along. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of being seen. The hangar slowly emptied as the engineers were dismissed, their muttering voices trailing into the storm outside. A hush fell over the space, broken only by the soft dripping of rain from the high rafters. Olivia remained near the shadowed wall, clutching her ragged coat close to her body. The billionaire stood a few steps away, his silhouette caught in the amber glow of a single overhead lamp. He had not left. Instead, he watched her with an intensity that unsettled her, though not in the way men on the streets had watched before. His gaze was not greedy nor cruel. It was searching, as though she carried within her something he was afraid to miss. Finally, he spoke. His voice was quieter now, stripped of the command it usually carried. "You shouldn't go back out there tonight, not to the streets." Olivia stiffened. "Where else would I go?" "You could stay," he said, simply. The words hovered between them, fragile, uncertain. She laughed once, soft and bitter. Stay? In a place like this? With people who look at me like dirt under their shoes? She shook her head. No, I've learned what happens when I get too close to worlds that don't want me. He flinched at her words, a subtle break in his polished composure. For a moment, he looked not like a billionaire, but like a man who carried regrets of his own. What if I told you I wanted you here? She froze. His eyes did not waver. Not as a servant, not as whatever they might think, but as someone I owe. Someone who showed me that even the things I thought were unfixable weren't. His gaze flicked to the silent jet engine, then back to her. Maybe I need that reminder more than I knew. Olivia's throat tightened. She looked away, to the vast emptiness of the hangar, to the rain-slicked windows. Every instinct in her urged her to run, to vanish before hope could wound her again. Yet part of her, quiet but insistent, longed to believe him. She whispered, "Why me?" The billionaire hesitated, then let out a breath that seemed to carry years of unspoken loneliness. Because sometimes the ones who have nothing see everything the rest of us are blind to. The silence stretched. Olivia's fingers trembled as she clutched her coat tighter, her mind at war with her heart. She had been burned too many times, betrayed, forgotten. Could she risk stepping into a world that had rejected her once before? But when she lifted her eyes and saw him standing there, wealthy, powerful, yet strangely vulnerable, she felt something stir, a thread connecting them, fragile but real. She did not answer, not yet. Instead, she lowered her gaze and whispered, "I don't know if I can trust you." His reply was simple, and it landed in her heart like a promise. "Then don't trust me yet. Just give me a chance to earn it." The storm outside pressed against the hangar like a living thing, rattling the steel beams and streaking the windows with trembling rivers of rain. Olivia stood still, the billionaire's words echoing in her chest. "Give me a chance to earn it." No one had ever asked for her trust before. They had taken it, broken it, or dismissed it as worthless. Yet here was a man who had everything: wealth, power, security, asking, not demanding. Her heart beat unevenly. She lowered her head, her voice so faint it almost drowned beneath the storm. "And if I say yes, what happens then?" The billionaire stepped closer, slow and careful, as though afraid she might vanish if he moved too fast. His features softened, lit by the golden glow of the lamp. "Then you'll have a place to stay. Not the streets, not the cold. A room, a bed, a door you can close." A door. The words struck something inside her, sharp and aching. She remembered nights curled under bridges, the sound of footsteps approaching, the terror of having no barrier between herself and the world. The thought of a door she could close, a place that was hers, however small, brought tears she could not stop. She turned away quickly, swiping her sleeve over her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" His silence stretched before he finally admitted, "Because I see too much of myself in you, more than I'd like to admit." That answer unsettled her more than any promise of comfort. Yet the way his voice wavered told her it was true. He wasn't pitying her. He was confessing. The storm quieted into a steady rhythm on the roof as Olivia slowly nodded. Not in surrender, but in something else, an agreement with herself. "I'll stay, just for now." Relief softened his features, but he didn't smile. He didn't try to touch her. Instead, he gave a small nod, as though sealing a fragile pact. "For now," he repeated. Later that night, a servant led Olivia to a quiet corner of the mansion. The room was simple compared to the glittering spaces she had seen earlier. Small, with plain white sheets on the bed, a single lamp, and a worn rug near the door. But to her, it was more than a room. It was safety. She stood there for a long moment, trembling, staring at the closed door. Then she slid down against it, pulling her knees to her chest. For the first time in years, she cried without fear of who might hear. Across the hall, the billionaire sat in his study, staring at the rain outside. The image of her face, uncertain, bruised by life, yet burning with quiet strength, haunted him. He poured a drink, but did not touch it. Instead, he whispered to the empty room, "Maybe this time I won't fail." The storm rolled on, carrying both their unspoken fears into the night. Morning arrived in muted shades of gray, the sky still heavy with clouds, as if the storm hadn't yet finished its business. Olivia awoke to the soft hum of distant traffic and the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the mansion's kitchen. For a moment, she allowed herself a small, fragile smile. She was inside, warm, safe. That in itself felt like a miracle. By mid-morning, the billionaire appeared at her door. He carried a tablet, his expression unreadable but gentle. "I need you to see something," he said. Olivia wiped her eyes and took a cautious step toward him. They moved together through the grand hallway to the hangar where the jet engine sat like a slumbering giant. Engineers hovered, papers in hand, tools scattered across workbenches, all with faces tight with frustration. He tapped the screen on the tablet. "Every attempt, every calculation, they've all failed. We're losing money, reputation, everything. And yet, I keep thinking, maybe the solution isn't in the textbooks." Olivia's pulse quickened. She knew this moment could change everything, not just for the billionaire, but for herself. She took a deep breath. "If you permit, I will fix it." Her voice was steady, yet beneath it was a river of fear and hope. The room froze. Heads turned, some in disbelief, some in mockery. The billionaire met her gaze, a flicker of awe passing through his eyes. "Do it," he said. Time slowed as she approached the engine. Her fingers traced over cold metal, feeling vibrations invisible to the engineers around her. She listened to the heartbeat of the machine, sensing the misalignments and hidden faults that no one else could hear. Sweat pricked her forehead as she worked, each motion precise, intuitive, a rhythm born not of training but of survival and observation. Minutes stretched into hours. Olivia barely noticed the world outside the hangar. She only knew the engine, its murmurs, its sighs, its stubborn resistance. And then, finally, the last piece clicked into place. She stepped back. The engineers exchanged stunned glances. Hesitation lingered in the air as the billionaire slowly nodded. "Start it." The engine roared to life, smooth, perfect, like it had never known failure. Cheers erupted, but Olivia barely heard them. Her knees nearly buckled, the weight of what she had done pressing into her chest. Relief and pride swirled together, a storm calmer than any she had ever known. The billionaire came to her side, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. His eyes, usually so guarded, were open, honest. "I've never seen anything like that," he admitted. "You did what no one else could. No one. I don't know how to thank you." Olivia looked at him, her own eyes shining. "You don't have to," she whispered. "Just believe me." For the first time, he did. The hangar echoed with applause, the engineers and staff finally letting themselves celebrate. But Olivia stood quietly, her heart still hammering from the intensity of the moment. She didn't need their cheers. She had proven to herself and to the world that she belonged. The billionaire approached, extending a hand. "Olivia," he said, his tone warm, respectful, almost reverent. I want you to come work with me, not as a visitor, not as a curiosity, but as part of my team. Whatever you choose, I want you by my side." Her lips curved into a smile, cautious yet hopeful. "I'd like that," she said. The words carried more than acceptance. They carried a promise of a future she hadn't dared imagine before. Weeks passed, and Olivia's world transformed. No longer homeless, no longer invisible, she worked alongside brilliant minds who now looked at her with admiration rather than doubt. Her story became legendary. How a young girl from the streets of Lagos had fixed the billionaire's jet engine when the best engineers failed. Yet the changes weren't just professional. Olivia began to trust again, to open her heart to the idea that she could be loved, valued, and respected. The billionaire, once distant and measured, now smiled more freely, shared moments of genuine laughter, and even sought her advice on matters beyond engineering. Their connection deepened, built on mutual respect, trust, and the unspoken acknowledgement of the extraordinary journey they had shared. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, Olivia stood by the hangar, watching the jet gleam in the fading light. The billionaire joined her, offering a quiet smile. "You've changed everything," he said softly. Olivia turned to him, eyes sparkling, cheeks warm. "No," she replied, "you've changed everything, and so have I." As they stood side by side, the city lights of Lagos twinkling in the distance, there was a sense of completion, of peace. From tragedy to triumph, from loneliness to belonging, Olivia's story had come full circle. She had faced despair, risked everything, and emerged stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever life had in store. The world would remember her, not just as the girl who fixed a jet engine, but as a symbol of courage, resilience, and the transformative power of belief. And in that quiet golden evening, Olivia smiled, knowing that her journey had only just begun.